Oh, 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 oh.
Welcome to Multiple O's, the spin-off podcast for The O Show. The O Show is hosted by Dr. Oriana Fox, the artist with a PhD in self-disclosure. You hopefully know the spiel by now. If you're interested in candid confessions, creativity, nonconformity, and mental health, you've come to the right place. This, my friends, is season 2 of this podcast, which explores the crossover between working on the self and working to change the world.
Hello, this is Oriana. Thank you for tuning in to Multiple O's. You know the deal. This is another in a long series of interviews I did on Instagram back in May 2021, which I have edited for your listening pleasure, and I will be sprinkling in new interviews here and there where possible. I'm pleased to introduce this week's guest, none other than the world's leading green autistic drag queen, Oozing Gloop. Gloop's provocative performance practice of queer spectacle has dazzled audiences at UK festivals, including Spill, Fierce, Dada Fest, and Unlimited, earning critical acclaim. In this interview, we discuss Gloop's dream lifestyle, their failed politics degree, their views on autobiographical performance, autism, and gender, and perhaps most importantly, Gloop illuminates their visionary political paradigm, commucracy. So without further ado, here's the interview. I'm absolutely chuffed that we have a surprise guest this afternoon who has already been described very brilliantly by Marissa Karneski, my prior guest, who just sang their praises because they are a fast rising star in the world of live art. I'm talking about none other than Oozing Gloop.
Hello. So sorry for my
goodness, we made it.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for my technological incompetence.
The crowd's going wild.
Hello. Oh my God. Oh, flower hit me. Oh my God. Wait. Oh, me. You're looking absolutely gorgeous. Let me get
thank you.
slightly more flattering. I'm in my mum's kitchen right now.
Very nice. And I know you're very busy working on a new project. Can you tell us about it?
I am actually. What am I doing? What new project? Am I busy working on a new project?
I thought you were. On a film set or something.
I know, no. What I'm doing, I'm working.
Uh-oh. Spinning circle of doom. Hello.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yes. So, oh my gosh. I've got Wi-Fi.
Let's try again.
The main projects that I'm sort of coming round to is this idea of commucracy, which is a new political imaginary, which has the tagline, "The revolution is buffering." And so we just had a wonderful revolutionary moment right there, right?
Perfect.
Okay, so here we go. Yeah, and then... Oh, no, carry on, please.
I was going to say, could you paint a picture of that utopia for us?
Well, actually, yes, I can. Which is just to say that, oh, you know what, actually, I will...
You wanted to talk about the project you're working on now. Sorry, I kind of...
No, it's perfectly fine. The two things are intimately linked. And what it is that basically, that in 2015, I was living in Norfolk and I was really completely just stuck. And in 2014, I'd been in New York with Kembra Fowler and I'd done Performance Art 101. And Kembra Fowler, do you know the artist Kembra Fowler?
No, I don't actually.
she's this amazing, she's the lead singer of the band, The Voluptuous Horrors of Karen Black. And she gets completely naked, paints herself in all manner of candy colors, puts 15 wigs on her head with some like black thigh-high stilettos, and gets 15 girls like her on stage. And I was in an apartment I went to an apartment in New York, and she has this real like logic of like life is art. And so I sort of like was like, I was really confused about, I didn't really have an artistic vocabulary. I didn't really have a vision. And so I kind of like, what I did in 2015 is I ripped apart everything of nostalgia value that I had. And I cut up all my clothes, and I took all my old costumes, and I twisted them down to create these forms, to think about new shapes and things. And in part of that process, I came up with the political idea of commucracy, which is communist democracy. And that comes from because I was in such a bad situation because I had a failed politics degree. And it's because basically that, and the reason why I sort of came to this is because both the terms communism and democracy are vastly misunderstood. If you mention, it's very hard to get round the education that we have on them with those terms. It really wastes a lot of time. And then also as well that we really lack the political category of utopia is something that is really interesting. Like, we live in a capitalist utopia right now. Like the idea that all of us can like individually choose to buy better things, and that will save the bees. This is utopian, and that we can fix these gigantic things with individual actions is utopian. But there's been a new utopia sort of came about in 2016, sort of like when I was also which was a really awful year, and then that was basically Brexit and the Brexit bus, which was like the utopian claim: there will be £350 million for the NHS if you vote for us, which of course is a complete lie. And it was a complete political fantasy of a better world. It was a functioning utopia. It was a functioning utopia, and it was a utopian way. So, and then, but anyway, so I've moved on quite a lot from then, and now I'm basically back at my mum's place, and I'm reviewing these old sculptures from this time and assessing their relevance to my ongoing artwork, which is a huge challenge, but a very interesting one at the same time. So yeah,
very interesting that it's like that costume would become a sculptural material and fuel new work. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I have them upstairs as well. I just don't know. I could show you these actually. I just don't know if the Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah, no, I don't want to risk losing
let's get a bit rare. But it was basically what it was as well. It was to do with this idea, right, of like basically being like, as a drag queen, I was very successful in having fun for myself. I felt
I've experienced that fun, by the way. I've seen you at the Lada celebration, 20 years. You were a particular. You led a conga line. I did a line we can all share. Yes, the Victoria line. A Victoria line. that was great. Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was this idea of this kind of quite associational sort of like William S. Burroughs style, like cut up but applied to performance. Where if we start layering these things, how can we? Because we intrinsically produce a linear experience out of any discombobulated element kind of thing. So it's sort of kind of like, and this is something I've always been very interested by, and that was a really fun moment. Yeah. But you were going somewhere else, I think, and I interrupted with Victoria line. No, just that actually, to be honest, I think what it was is that's really where I'm at my best. But the difficulty, it's all I've really ever wanted to do with my life is live somewhere with a large queer population where I can sew costumes easily and go out in them. And the reason as to why that hasn't happened is this huge journey of political utopia, queerness, disability, and also as well gentrification, of course, because the structure of our cities in the 21st century is fundamentally is changing, and the amount of city space there is for these artistic cultures to emerge in the way that they have, especially in the second half of the 20th century, is a completely different situation and stuff. So
lots of artists that I really inspire me, like Patti Smith or William S. Burroughs or the Club Kids or like Lee Barry. They were all living in squats or very easily access accommodation in urban centres. And then when they did have those spaces, they had very large spaces for studios and for reflection, so they could do all these crazy, insane things. And we just don't have that in the same way now. So it's very so that sort of necessity that sort of led into these other sort of exploratory areas. But I found actually, so I made these big sculptures like back in 2016, but the big problem with them is they're a bit too personal. And I saw something, and I'd be interested in what your perspective is on this, that as an artist, when something's very personal and very important to you, you don't necessarily have you don't give it the freedom to be experimental with it.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, and then so it doesn't have that necessarily the same kind of spark that certain other things do. Whereas I think with drag, because it was so fun, I would always be very experimental with it, and therefore that could be something that made it exciting.
Or sometimes it can be like a context can close down your experimentalness. But and getting too personal, I don't know. Or going down a quite autobiographical route can be. Is that what you mean?
Yes, kind of. Yeah, it's interesting as well. Like I have the most peculiar relationship to autobiography because I love it, but I also hate it. But I love it. What
do you hate about it?
Okay, so what I hate about autobiographical work, my friend one time, I always reference this performance. I don't know who the artist is, thankfully, but my friend saw a live art show that was about someone who'd made an autobiographical show. It was a very privileged person who was moving house for the first time. And they were like, and the show itself was actually quite interesting because it basically explored, what is it to move house? How do we, when we move away from our context and our connections and things. But it was fundamentally someone just stood up on stage for like 2 hours being like, I have to move house and it's hard. It's just like, this is not a context in which autobiographical work is appropriate.
Yes.
However, I maintain that show, it was jokingly to my friend, I said, that person kind of sounds like a goldfish. Now, if they'd have done this show autobiographically, but as a goldfish, I think that would have been an absolute standout.
Right.
So if there was something,
somehow move to another bowl.
Yeah, so I'm moving to another bowl. I've never done this before. It's my whole world. And then like that is that carrier for that very genuine emotion. Because of course I love autobiography. I love hearing about people's stories and lives and all these things. And also as well, like autobiography has been such an important cornerstone of feminist artwork as well. That it's especially, for example, do you know Alison Bechdel's Fun Home?
No, I don't.
It's really good.
Everyone you've mentioned so far, it's like, no.
Right, I'll send you that.
I called myself an art historian.
Well, oh really? Like what? Like it's
well, I teach art history, so yeah. I kind of have to pretend to be some of the days of the week.
Yes. Well, but you've heard of the Bechdel test.
Yes, I have. Yes.
Alison Bechdel.
I love the Bechdel.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic thing. Actually, I just started watching it. I'm like, God, so much stuff even now is still failing the Bechdel test.
Yes. Yeah.
The Bechdel test, for those of you not in the know, is a simple list of questions formulated by Alison Bechdel to evaluate a work of fiction, such as a film, on the basis of its inclusion and representation of female characters. The questions are: 1, are at least 2 women featured? 2, do these women talk to each other? And 3, do they discuss something other than a man?
Yeah, like so Alison Bechdel is this amazing queer I don't know if they're butch, but like there's a queer lesbian intellectual who came up with have you seen the original Bechdel comic?
I think I have.
Yeah. It's just 4 panels of which is so wonderful. And they've got this amazing autobiographical piece called Fun Home, about the fact that they grew up in a funeral home.
Oh, okay.
But it's also about the fact that her dad basically was a closet case who died, and maybe it's suspected that he killed himself, but like because he was like there. But like but basically it's this amazing work of like autobiography, of memory of these really moving things, but. And of her investigating her own emerging queerness and her father's repressed queerness within the context of their home. But I think what makes it really interesting is that it's very firmly rooted in like her present perspective as an adult queer person looking back. And then I think because you're there in the present with her looking at that, that's a really wonderful moment of it, of autobiography. Like I think that's something about it that makes it wonderful.
So, yeah. And so can you go back to talking about this utopian commucracy and the definitions and this politics degree? Why did you, my question was like, why did you fail the degree?
Yeah.
Just curious.
The same reason I've got an art degree, baby. I was going out. No. It was actually I thought about that. Earlier, basically. So, I have Asperger's, and the term Asperger's has fallen out of fashion.
It's not in the DSM anymore or something. It's like they got rid of it as a diagnosis.
Yeah. Basically, the thing is, Asperger's is Asperger's is a great diagnosis. It's great to have it. It's sort of like, you know how like schizophrenia is like an umbrella diagnosis that has many things within it. And this is one of the big critiques of schizophrenia as a diagnostic category, and there's lots of work in it. Well, autism has many different elements to it, kind of thing. And so by removing the Asperger's diagnosis, they actually did the reverse. They lumped more experiences together under one thing. However, it's very hard to find out proper information on it. It is, and the only real difference in Asperger's and autism is that autism was discovered in America in the early 20th century, and Asperger's was discovered by Dr. Hans Asperger's in Germany, in Europe.
Yes, I was just listening to a podcast about that, but that's another story.
Oh, did you? What did you think?
Yes, it was fascinating because obviously the research was into Asperger's was delayed by World War II. It's like one of the casualties of World War II was the way it was phrased in the podcast. Like,
oh, wow, because I heard Dr. Hans Asperger's was a Nazi.
I don't know whether he was a Nazi or I'm not sure what his status was, but I just know the research was kind of curtailed by that catastrophic event. I don't know what part he played in it.
Yeah, okay. This is probably why it's very difficult to find this information out, because there's a rumor, there's like a rumor in some forums that he was like a Nazi or something like that. But it's like if you're like a German doctor doing experiments in like this in this particular social context and all these things and stuff. But nevertheless, it's I would love the link to the podcast. Actually, that would be absolutely amazing.
It's called "You're Wrong About," and it's a very recent episode. And I love this podcast, so I'm happy to promote it. It's called "You're Wrong About," and it's like these two millennials talking about historical events. Usually, it's American things that happened that were kind of media phenomenon, like the Twinkie defense or the O.J. Simpson trial, or the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas debacle, and all that stuff. And they go into it. One of them, they're both journalists, and one of them researches the topic intensely, and the other one comes to it with their memory of it, growing up and hearing about it, and then they talk about it. So they do that with the vaccine, anti-vaxxing, but the episode, and they bring in a third guest who has autism and is kind of an expert on that and an advocate, and the three of them discuss it and kind of talk about this. But it's not really about anti-vaxxers; it's more about autism.
Yeah. So wait, so the whole thing's about so the anti-vaccine. Okay, yeah. So interesting actually as well, because just like, I mean, I for one am looking forward to everyone being autistic with this vaccine rollout. So. So there's an amazing piece of information, right? It's that that basically one of the reasons, there's multiple reasons. So one of the people are quite often like, oh, there's all these autistic people around now, and they never used to be around and stuff. And there's the association with vaccines comes from because there's often a certain moment where young children will change very suddenly. And so the perception is that, and it's to do with something to do with brain development or something like that, but the perception is, oh, you were a perfectly fine baby, and then you've had this sudden moment, and now you're not, and you've been vaccinated during this time, and something's come into my baby's not who my baby should be. But what's thought actually is if you go back and you look at the myths of the changeling, which is like there was this notion that the baby had been stolen by fairies and replaced with a fairy baby. And the fairy baby would be one that would scream and scream and couldn't be comforted, and like all these very classic things of autistic babies. And so there are certain people who think that the changeling myth is one that explains autism in a pre-diagnostic situation. But I was doing some work with some things, and it suggested that you find out about the conditions of your birth. So I asked my mum about the way that I was born, and she said it was very difficult. And basically, the long and the short of it is that the pregnancy was completely fine. I was ready to come out perfectly fine, but during the birth process, I completely turned myself around and caused huge problems. And at one point, my mum was so exhausted she went under, and she knows that she's like, oh God, I would have died. Like she was like, I would have died if this had been back in the day and stuff like that. And basically, autistic babies have more difficult births statistically. So as technology has got better to help, this very complicated process of birth, that is part. So more autistic babies, typically, like autistic babies, and also maybe the mother will both die during the birth process. And so that's one of the reasons why there's been this raise. And it's also that if we can see that then an autistic, if someone's autistic affects the way they're born, then of course we know that then the vaccines have absolutely
that proves it's a myth. But it's also about this. There's no causal link between these correlations necessarily. Like things are correlated, but there's not. That doesn't imply. That's one of those rules of statistics or whatever. That just because there's a correlation, there's no causal implication. You cannot make a causal anyway. But it's interesting because the podcast does not say that at all, but they attribute the rise in diagnoses to the fact that public schools were made to had more funding at a certain point. They had to do testing to get this extra funding for autistic children, and it was because of that testing that was finding and making more diagnoses. So that's particular. Obviously, I said it's a very American-centered podcast.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting.
I didn't know this birth.
But I was the first person in my primary school to have a formal autism diagnosis, and basically this. And we got funding for it, and there was like loads of new funding put in, and then for this and stuff. And so basically as well, what happens, and so it's very interesting because basically the diagnosis is getting better and better and better earlier and earlier, which is fantastic. Like an early autism diagnosis is a fantastic thing. I'm so glad that I got mine earlier because you don't, just because you don't get diagnosed when you're younger, you can end up with, if you're not diagnosed, you can end up with a bigger problem later in life that's harder to fix because the brain's more set in the way and all this stuff. But so support at primary school is better, support at high school is better, support at college is better, but support at university has not kept up with any of these things. And this is basically what happened to me during my politics degree, is that I was having problems with the politics department. So then, it was the departmental nature of the university complex, basically. So they said, oh, well, go to the disability department. And so then instead of saying, okay, if you're having a problem with this department, let's target this here, it was like, well, just go to another department then. And so it doubled the problems that I was having, basically. And one thing led to another. And I had this sort of perception that I was like, I'm going to go to university and it's going to fix all my problems in life. And I went to university and everything completely fell apart. And, but, I had my politics degree and I had a sort of, it wasn't so much that I had the degree. It's that within the space of the degree, I had the chance to go to a library full of like Judith Butler books, and they weren't being taught my course, but I had the chance to read books. I had the chance to talk to tutors, and I had the chance to develop ideas and to really, because even though all of the other stuff, at least I got to really engage with the material of politics. And one of the main takeaways of my politics degree is that politics is too complicated. Left-wing theory does not connect with the working class that it's supposed to be assisting. It's not actually, and that we don't, and basically that we have a complete loss of narrative as well. And we need cohesion, but also that the current model of the left is completely unable to get together the solidarity that it requires. And that's for lots of reasons, not in the least the overwhelming whiteness of typical leftist movements and typical communist movements as well, completely unwilling to accept a lot of the like colonial critiques because they're really, really white. And that's why they've completely failed to keep abreast of and stay present within the new political epoch and all of these things. So basically I came up with the idea. It was really funny because like communism's great, but like I was like, it's a lot of problems. And then I also got to do some really good reading with democracy. And democracy is really sexy. But whenever you say like, I think we should live democratically, or there's people who are like, but we are living democratically. And you're like, oh no, but it should be more democratic. And they're like, yeah, but it already is. And it's just terrible. You can't, there's no way of getting past it. There's the democracy we're living in is not very democratic, basically. And the communism comes down to basically just the communist hypothesis, which is just the idea of a classless society. And that's all it really is. It doesn't, and that's not that there's no, it's the idea of two classes, as it were, like the idea of owners and workers. So basically I was like, right, so we don't really understand what democracy is, don't really understand what communism is. Arguing about these things doesn't really go anywhere, doesn't really do anything. So what happens if we just put these together and we say like commucracy, and to create a new line in the sand and say this is a new thing from which we can discuss ideas. And that was basically, it was completely from looking at, in the end, 6 years of studying, I basically came to the idea it was that you need new ideas, they have to be simple, and they have to be ones that people can get behind, was the takeaway from that's what we need in politics, as it were, or political art, or on the left.
Yeah, and it's I like the fact that you've coined a new term, which would force the question of redefinition. But it's a new term that incorporates two existing terms that you're saying we don't understand well enough. So yeah, that sounds brilliant. I want to ask you like your views about socialism, but also I want to ask you something else. I'm just saying it out loud so I don't forget. Because I'm already forgetting as I'm speaking. What was it?
I was so clever. It was really smart.
You are so clever. It was really smart. Oh, I wanted to call you out, actually.
Do go on. Oh, I've been waiting to feel.
Yeah, because you said about getting an early diagnosis, like to fix the autistic child.
Oh, no, not to fix the autistic. Yeah.
You said fix. You said,
yeah.
I think you used the word fix, so that I'm calling you out on that because I just, It sounds very ableist to say. Yeah.
Why are you
laughing at me as I call you out? How dare you laugh at me?
No.
I've never called out anyone before, I don't think, to the face.
It's perfectly fine. I'll clarify what I mean by that. So, first of all, what I mean by that is that basically going through the world and sort of like knowing a lot about Asperger's simply by rote of like reading about it and these sorts of things to understand myself more and all this stuff, encountering people who I'm like, wow, you are diagnosed, but like maybe you have Asperger's, like just encountering people who like, basically I've just ended up coining the term like, there's a lot of situations in adulthood where you don't know if someone's got undiagnosed Asperger's or if they're just an asshole. And sometimes, in fact very often, it's both. Like, there's this thing where it's like, where it's a very difficult thing that like within, you know, like we need to get away from the idea of delivering disability support out of a moral obligation and start doing it simply because out of it's justice in that sense. Because when it becomes to a moral obligation, the people who deliver it are good. It pacifies the disabled people who then receive it. The disabled people then have to be eternally grateful to these things. They can't then have an aspiration of a greater thing and stuff. And so, and it sort of it gets into this thing of like, it gets into the territory of going, oh, aren't they sweet? And it's like, no, loads of autistic people are complete assholes and it has nothing to do with their diagnosis whatsoever. It's everything to do with the way that they're just, as many people are assholes as well. You know what I mean? Like in a perfectly normal way. Like, but there is like, autistic things are very, very specific kind of thing. And so it becomes very difficult later in life if you don't get an early diagnosis, basically for autism, the autism doesn't go away. And there's something about that.
I think maybe the way to put it is that one is that the child would be disabled by not having the diagnosis, because then the social structures can't be in place to facilitate their participation, participation. I can't speak. Participation. Yeah. I can't say the word. You know what I'm trying to say. In the world. Yeah. Social life.
But basically, if you don't, what happens is so it's kind of like, I'll sort of do it this is the best way to do it. It's kind of like a tree, right? So you've got like, if it's growing up and it's spreading out like this, kind of thing. But then at the beginning, you've got one growing up and there's a branch that's going off like here to the side kind of thing. There's like a way to sort of like catch that and train it back in kind of thing, which is to say that like when I was younger, I wasn't learning to speak properly. I made my own language basically, and I was communicating with it, but I wasn't taking on speech. So if they hadn't, and so that probably would be used to diagnose Asperger's now, but it wasn't used then, but it was used later when I was diagnosed. But if there had just been no sort of intervention at that point, I wouldn't have acquired basic language skills kind of early on. So and it would have been like there. So there's lots of things that also when a child is kind of like a petri dish, like it's like a lab, like, you know, they've only had a limited amount of time. So when there's certain things happening, you understand that that's not something because the child's doing that out of an intention or out of these things, or they don't have the agency for these sorts of things. So that then you can be like, you can take the time to work with them to elucidate their understanding, so that then that child can understand themselves and their perspective and how that doesn't line up with everyone else's. And so if autism was on a scale of 1 to 10, and out of every, say, and so like if 8, 9, and 10 are like nonverbal, like deeply autistic, like very heavily, and then you've kind of got like, and then you've got sort of like 6 and 7 the same, with like 6 or 7, say 7 things out of 10 they do sort of come off as like autistic, or come off as a bit like they're going to get like an early diagnosis. But if you're only like a 3 or a 2 on the scale, you're not going to get an early diagnosis. But that difference isn't going to go away. And so then what can happen is then later on in life, you can have a lot of problems. And so someone who's only got a relatively small amount of autism, it's not a very severe case, will then later have a mental breakdown and need to be sectioned or something like that, or have complete psychotic breaks, or get a personality disorder diagnosis, which is where they're just like, we can't do anything. You know, it's just like, they're like, you are just broken somehow. Like, that's what a personality diagnosis disorder is. It's like that. So that's why early diagnosis is better, because then it means that there's a lot more ability that can happen, and reflexivity and all of these things. But precisely because autism, you're very right, cannot be fixed. It can be worked with, you know, but yeah, there is no fix. And it's also why any conversations about the cause of autism are basically very irrelevant, because they're all about how can we then come back.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That is touched upon on You're Wrong About, but yeah. instead of spending all this energy on finding the cause and fixing, that the energy should be put into enabling, better support systems. So,
yeah, well done on your call out.
that led to something worthwhile, didn't it? So, although it wasn't a hair pulling kind of. Didn't lead to what you were hoping.
No, it is. It's good. It's good. It's a very interesting thing because it's also again we don't generally have like if you really want to understand autism, a great movie to watch is the Temple Grandin movie.
Oh, okay.
Have you seen it?
Lots of no. I mean, you keep recommending things. I'm like, no. I make them look like.
It's okay. No, I always like people are like. I always thought about this.
What
this
is
movie,
it called again? The
Temple Grandin movie. It's a HBO movie.
Temple Grandin.
HBO movies are some really great things. So there's an amazing autistic survivor called Temple Grandin, who redesigned veterinary animal husbandry structures. Redesigned basically farming structures based on animal psychology because they basically put themselves in the mind of the animal and then worked at things, but sort of backwards engineered it from there, rather than saying like, this is a farm and this should work in this way kind of thing. So they completely revolutionized these things. And then people found out that they were autistic. And when they were younger, her mother was told to institutionalize her because she would never participate in society and all these things. So that's historically what's happened. So we're only now reaching a voice where there can be a multitude of different autistic voices at different moments and perspectives that can offer these different insights into what autism looks like in adults actually as well, and like in autonomous adults and these things and these sorts of structures. And so it's good it's great that we to have a nuance to bring that out on a platform is really wonderful.
I agree. Can you speak a bit about I don't know if you ever did say what your new project is, but I was going to move on to talking about gender because I am curious about how your identification along gender lines.
Yeah. Well,
and actually I have heard you describe it's kind of weird, but I actually have read I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. I feel a bit weird because I was on the bursary committee for Catherine Araniello, with Lada. So I've read your kind of description on a form, like when you have to disclose your whatever identity characteristics. And I think, and your response was very memorable to the question of gender. It was like, I think a lot of frames it as, how do you describe, I mean, this is weird because it's like a consent thing. It's like you gave this information in good faith.
Yeah.
But it was private. Now I'm revealing it on the internet. So
I mean, at least you're doing it with me. So like, hey, like, yeah, like, I have written a lot of things in a lot of different forms, a lot of different genders in a lot of different forms on a lot of different boxes. What did it say?
A lot of frames the question as how do you describe your gender? And your answer was like something like late at night when I'm I don't know, it was all about the time and space in which you describe it. It was there was nothing actually about gender in it.
No, yeah, I remember. You're like, how do you describe your
You're like late at night when I'm, I don't know what.
It was because it's like how do you describe the gender with words? It was it's been I really enjoy the popularization of non-binary and like they pronouns as well, because this is a very comfortable space for me to just kind of be like, I'm non-binary, I prefer they pronouns, because I'm like, it feels like a really good rest stop at like the right time, where you're just like, oh my God, you're just like, oh, like I can just sit down in this, like this is okay, like I can be here for a bit, I can be non-binary, it can be they, like my the idea of fitting into like the primacy of a binary gender, like with these like he or she characteristics kind of thing, can be shelved for a minute. What it's very interesting is actually a really wonderful thing I found out online called autigender. And this is, one in 100 people is trans, but 1 in 10 autistic people identifies as trans. Like, there's a huge, trans, or like, I think that's including like non-binary as well. Like, yeah. And like, especially as well, there is like, especially AFAB people assigned female at birth and diagnosed with autism. Generally, just sort of a bit like, I'm not doing this woman bullshit. Like, I'm just not. Like,
I have not heard AFAB before either.
AFAB, it's like AFAB and AMAB.
I like
I'm female at birth, I'm male at birth. Yeah, like it's like a
Okay. No, I mean I know the full-on thing, but just the abbreviation, I never.
Yeah, AFAB. How do you tell the difference between AFAB non-binary people and AMAB non-binary people?
Is this a joke? Like that's the setup?
Yeah, that's the setup.
How?
The acrylic nails. Normally I have acrylic nails on when I'm telling that joke, but yeah, all the AFAB non-binary, like I'm non-binary and I'm getting my nails done, and then all the AFAB non-binary, like I'm non-binary and I'm not getting my fucking nails done. Like it's obviously it's a joke designed to troll a lot of my friends, and it's a piece of light-hearted fun, so I don't want anyone taking it too seriously. But yeah, so it's like 1 in 10 autism. So basically, as well, it's also what's really funny, right? So so to get really classic, right? You've seen the movie Rain Man,
yeah,
and so this like these savant level of skills, like imagine if you gave all of those abilities of like code unpicking and all of these things, and like I can see all of this to your gender dysphoria. Imagine if you took all of that and you gave it to the most evil part of you that was just like, you're not really this, you're not like just like be like, oh, it's that it just means that any kind of like gender configuration that I start getting comfortable within, like I discover I just end up in a position often where I'm absolutely pulling it to pieces, and I'm just kind of like, why am I thinking this so much? This is really ridiculous. Like, and I found this thing, autigender, and it's basically that it's not autism as gender, but it is that one's experience of gender or one's experience of gender and autism, that the two things are completely entwined, and you can't really abstract out this nice coherent sort of like, neutral gendered experience where you can just be like, and that is my gender, from which then you can say that this acts, that actually that gender itself is then within the realm that of sort of like these basically is why when I read it, it's like I was like, right, this is why I'm consistently uncomfortable with anything I arrive at, and I'm continuing having these sorts of like very deep like revelations about gender and gender experience, and being like, oh, this is amazing, and then later on just being like, but wait, there's all of this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and like, and even though I know very well, like, oh, but that's just because that's the patriarchy. Oh, that's just because that's that's just transphobia. That's all of these things and stuff. But then I have also got that and then it's deeply stressful. So like, but I would say broadly, like, so as a catch-all term, like non-binary, and then I would say, yeah, autigender. And like, I think that, to be honest, the new project I'm actually working on right now, which I've remembered now what it is actually, it's an old project, but it's a magazine called Home and Country. And it's an autonomous lifestyle magazine.
Lovely.
Right. Like, yeah. Like, of course, the thing is, about your website, you would love it. Yeah, it's because it's like, I love glossy magazines. Like, and so it's sort of kind of like, it's about taking like because I'm 30 now, so it's about taking the sort of 10 years of work since sort of like my 20s, like since like 20, like when I first started like getting dressed up and going out to clubs and things, and then putting this all together in like a one-off art piece that's a glossy magazine to sort of like put together, you know, that idea of like flicking through a glossy.
Do you have who's the publisher?
There is no publisher. Like,
oh, I think I know a publisher that might be interested in that.
Oh, that would be amazing. I didn't even think about
it. And might be able to get you some, I don't know how you feel about corporate sponsorship or like fashion sponsorship. I think I know somebody who might be very interested in that project.
Well, I think oh wow, okay, but this is it, because basically as well, like, oh yeah, no, I would fucking love that. That would be amazing. Like, I'm just right now, I'm basically carding out the content for it and stuff, because I'm working out because there's artwork made by autistic, there's autistic artwork, and then there's artwork made by autistic people for neurotypical consumption. And autistic artwork is typically very autistic, and it doesn't very connect with a wider audience. And then artwork made by autistic people for neurotypical consumption is often, then when it's catered to these things, often is very interesting and intricate, and something that is, you know, this in terms of the audience, this is going off the audience experience. The audience is like, oh my God, wow, this is something really crazy. I hadn't really thought about that before, all these things. Whereas like when it is just made by autistics, in the realm of autistics, it's impenetrable in some way, kind of thing. And it would need probably like a curator or something. That's the term I'm looking for. It would need a curator. And that still then would be something where someone would come in and take the experience and curate it so that it could then become accessible again, kind of thing. Like, and so that's not really a judgment on either of those positions of saying that one is better than the other or anything like that. It's just that I know that when I make work that I think is interesting, often a lot in certain ways, it doesn't connect, and it's very impenetrable, and it's like really and then but then when I take into consideration and there are certain other, like, and I noticed from certain other seeing other autistic artists who have really autistic things, and I really love it. I'm like, oh my God, and I show it to other people, and they're a bit like, nah. You see this amazing thing, like so. But I think we all have to do that, you know, and we all do that at some point as artists as well, which is how much am I going to compromise with the viewer, kind of thing as well. Like, it's sort of just like, so I don't want to be like, oh, it's so hard. It's like we all have these things, and there is a part of that. With that, and
it's like what you said with the goldfish show. I mean, there wasn't enough effort there made for the audience, perhaps.
Yeah, it was very indulgent kind of thing. So that's the question: how much do I just indulge? How much do I just indulge my autistic perspective versus how much do I think? These are important ideas that have social connotations that I should take the time to sit with and make them accessible then as well, because it's interesting. And it's also as well then because it's just like, of course I can just make work that I just enjoy, kind of thing. Like, but also I think that there's things happening in the world that need artists to make work about, so that we can have new vocabularies and reflective ways of thinking and feeling and being around things. You know, like, I think that I often go to galleries and stuff, and I think you have all this time, you have all this space, you have all these resources, and you haven't made any kind of real statement or something like that about how we're living. Like, and you really could here, you know, like, so I don't know, but it's very curious, because sometimes also then when you're trying too hard to do that, you actually completely suffocate the poetry of what you're trying to do as well. So and I think that it's kind of, so for me, I'm sort of making this project I guess, to sort of like to answer those questions within myself, to sort of create some kind of ongoing thing. And then once I get that put together, I mean, like, I don't fucking care if like Nestle wants to sponsor it. Like, I would like take that.
No,
if it's going to help.
It would be like a fashion brand or something, it would be like Gucci or I don't know, something.
Oh, wow.
I can't even think of any fashion brands right now, but something like that. Like,
it's perfectly fine, but even when I make a draft, I'll just send it to you. You can have a little look or something like that, because I'm definitely going to need a lot of eyes on it, and it will take a while and stuff. But yeah, but it's also the reason why, of course, home and country is because it's another way of saying public and private, and the personal and the political kind of thing. But I just think, yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, and then also if we think about Brexit, like Little England, and like then this whole process of then the pandemic and all of these things, I feel that questions of home and country have been central to the last 5 years of our political sphere, like absolutely, like and that negotiation of public and private space.
Yes, and also, I mean, the polarization of politics, or the atomization, has been all about identity expressive discourse. So like, it's a zero sum game, and I'm on this side and we belong here, and and it's them over there, and they get an inch on us, we're losing, those kinds of, I don't know if that relates to what you're saying, but.
No, it does. It's absolutely about that, because it's very much about, it's that we live within, I mean, there's never been more money than ever before. Basically, there's never ever been more money than there is now, and that's because of economic growth and all these things. So, but
in the hands of the billionaires, you mean?
Yes, and then it's because we've lived, basically what it is, we lived in a time of wage repression. So even though money has been growing and the market's been growing, and like a dollar then is not what a dollar is now, etc., the percentage share that workers are taking home versus has been kept low. And so, and in an Anglo-Saxon context, like home ownership is really pushed because debt encumbered workers don't go on strike. So if you're paying off a mortgage on your home that's got your family in it and stuff, you're gonna continue to accept really shitty conditions because you're just like, it's your home. Like, it's just like that. It's this kind of almost pre-political. And then there's this kind of like, when we get into this, well, that's my home and I don't want to lose my home, and that's my space, and I've only got this very little space, and I'm got such relatively low takeaway from this gigantic sphere of wealth and all of these things, that I'm going to feel that very, very keenly if any of these things happen. And so on that level, it's a zero-sum thing. But then at the other end, having money makes you money, and giving you investments gives you access to more investments. And then what you have is you have multiple networks feeding in and supporting each other, all to support you getting more things. So, and with all of the oppressions we face, there are multiple overlapping networks that feed each other, and they actually they feed each other. And as a population, we feed them. So they would actually perpetuate themselves even without someone over the top going down on them. Yet when it comes to activism and getting resources,
down on them.
Yeah. Swallowing it whole. Yeah, but then when it comes to because none of us can get a fucking bean, then when it comes to producing resistance, it turns into a zero-sum game. So, and we have to get out. And zero-sum thinking is like the death of resistance and resisted movements and stuff. And it's calculated in that way. So it's entirely forgivable that people get into that thought thing, but we have, totally. Zero-sum politics are really, they're so prevalent, and we have, people don't even know what the word zero-sum is. So, yes, it's also wonderful to do.
People don't know what the word is?
Yeah, the words. Yeah, zero-sum games. I've had situations where I've explained to people before, like in political context, what a zero-sum power game is.
Oh. Okay, I was like, should we explain it to the audience?
Yeah. What's your conception of a zero-sum power game?
A zero-sum power game is where, there's a clear winner and a loser, and there's and that any gains by one side means losses on the other,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's also and it's like but we all know that ultimately it's just a game for Jeff Bezos.
Exactly. Yes, that's right. That's a better definition.
It's excellent definition of zero sum of the power games. This is it, kind of thing. And the point is that within ourselves that we get this very we get on such a level. Well, there's also can
I just say one thing? When you're locked into a zero sum game, it makes it almost impossible. Well, you said it already. It makes it impossible to have shared solutions to shared problems, right?
Yeah, and it's amazing though because
we have shared problems and we cannot get to a fucking shared solution because we're too busy. I don't know. Trying to win.
We can't. Okay, so and this is the classic leftism. The classic leftism that's lost is that, and it gets into but it needs to be these things, it needs to be those things, and it's like this is really when you read old school Marx and stuff like that. What actually happens is a mental flip kind of thing, because you need a bit of mental flip with it, and it's about saying because. I remember I was at a Marxist festival one time and things. I was in the economics class and they all hated me because I was delaying the process because they were talking about how sort of Marxist economics was basically scientifically superior. And I was like, but wait, this is surely moral. This is a moral thing. This isn't, how do you, and they were like, no, it's scientific. And fundamentally, and I was like, I delayed the whole thing and stuff. And this was I completely disrailed this class. So people hated it. It was also as well, it was a real classic example of people on the left being puffed up with their own because we're actually technically better. And it's but you're not better. What it is that, or you have to, it's basically about when you say actually it's about just making the choice between where ultimately your interest lies. Is it in the betterment of people and population and the people who are living to live well in a way that is going to sort of help us all mutually grow? Or is it about just sort of investing in property schemes that will then go on and accumulate various forms of interest in all of these things and stuff? I know it's also that when we all come together, we all have a little bit of an excess. And then when we come together, then we can start feeling that. Until then, it doesn't even happen in 3 or 4 people. But when you get multiple people together, then these things can take on their own energy and start feeding each other and themselves, kind of thing. Which is, there's a lot of things strategically done to make sure that never happens, basically.
Right. Yeah. I feel like all the guests on the O Show this live series are kind of singing the same tune or riffs on the same, I don't know, melody, and they're just but we're so separate, we're separated by these squares, so and by these, I don't know.
I'm sure you're absorbing all of them, and then we're going to be by the end of it, you're going to explode out and lead the glorious revolution we all need. I'm going to be there. Okay, I'm going to look great, and I'm going to be a cheerleader.
That sounds great. But I'm very concerned because you said you only had half an hour and it's been almost an hour. Do you have to be somewhere?
I have to film something to get it off to somewhere, and I have some work that I have to do this evening. I'm aware we've run over slightly, but I've had such a wonderful time talking to you.
I'm so glad. I've had a wonderful time talking to you as well.
Hey, it's been really fantastic. And also, I would love to come on your podcast at some point in the future as well.
Yay!
Yeah, we can structure things. Yeah, structure things and a little bit more stuff. I also do a podcast. We don't have guests, but I have a podcast with my friend Olympia, by the way. It's called Slurry as well. So, which Great. You can, if you want to hear more at any point as well or anything like that. But no, it's been one I would love to come and talk to you at some point again in the future as well. It's been really, really nice.
Yes, lovely. Thank you so much. I really, 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 really appreciate you coming on the show, and I know the audience does as well.
Oh my God, there it is.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching.
Bye. Bye.
That's all for my first interview with Oozing Gloop. I say my first interview because I hope very much that we will speak again soon. I did very much enjoy speaking with them and have loads of follow-up questions whirring around my head. I hope you, my dear listeners, also enjoyed it. And if you happen to have any burning questions for Oozing Gloop, do feel free to email them to me so that when the follow-up takes place, because I'm assuming at this point it will, I will be sure to raise them. Send over those questions to studio@orianafox.com. That's studio@orianafox.com. In the meantime, do check out Oozing Gloop's own podcast, Slurry, which is co-hosted by them and fellow Berlin-based drag artist Olympia Bukakis. See details in the show notes. Thanks again to Oozing Gloop for the interview and for you, my dear listeners, for taking the time to listen. If you'd like to support the show, you can do that just by listening to it, by subscribing, by reviewing and rating, or by supporting us via Patreon, patreon.com/OrianaFox. All the details are in the show notes.
Next time on Multiple O's. Next time on Multiple O's.
Next time on Multiple O's, keeping with the theme of neurodiversity and performance art, I will share the interview with dyspraxic live art poster boy Daniel Oliver. So you can look forward to that.
Next time on Multiple O's.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for continuing to listen. Thanks for getting to this point in this episode to hear me say, I hope you will accept yourselves unconditionally, your lives, and other people, because we're all just fallible human beings.